Hi, guys, and welcome to another episode of Amazonia YouTube channel. For today's episode, we have Elizabeth Green from Junglr, and we're going to talk about balancing motherhood and entrepreneurship. So, Elizabeth, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. I love this topic. It's definitely what I don't
Likewise.
normally talk about. Aside that of myself, I don't really share very often. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm really eager to hear how you balance that and to give a more perspective to our listeners and viewers. Can you share a little bit of your background on your work life and then especially on your private side? How do you balance all of that? And then we just get into it. And also, we're gonna be talking about managing the account, so not just private part of the story, but also we're gonna add how Elizabeth is managing pretty big catalogs of thousands of products. So stay tuned, Elizabeth. It's to you now.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll give the professional side first because that's the thing that most people probably know. I'm a co-founder along with my husband, which I don't know if a lot of people know. I know you work with your life as well, so we definitely connected on that. And so we are co-founding of an Amazon advertising agency called Junglr. So we help founder-led brands who are looking to scale without having to sacrifice profits, build what we call business-centric ad strategies, meaning ad strategies that are going to get them there in the way that they want towards their goals. So that's probably something we'll talk about because I think that definitely feeds into life a little bit. And then I guess the hot topic is why the heck am I qualified to talk about building entrepreneurship and motherhood? I definitely feel like I'm qualified there. I have 6 children. So some people know that, some people don't. Every time I post
Yeah,
about that on LinkedIn, I
congratulations.
think everyone loses their minds.
Yeah, because you're so successful as a business owner and as a professional, so it's even more, your success is even more, what's the right word, like even bigger because you have so many family obligations. So
So many little
yeah, obstacles. So yeah, we'll talk about it more. Yeah, me and my wife Yelena, we have 2 boys, and we, even with 2 boys, we see how difficult it may be. So they're jumping in the middle of the calls, is it a sales call or whatever. So it's really sometimes tough with all the school and the diseases and everything. So it can really be challenging to say the least. So is there anything, I know it is, but is there anything particular that you can share with us? What was some of those funny moments that you witnessed during the, for example, live podcast or something?
Oh my gosh. The most terrifying one of those, and the thing that I think was the most public, it's one of our lives. You can go watch it. It's sitting there on our YouTube. It's not edited. I mean, there's plenty of funny stories, like when my twins, so by the way, the youngest 2 are twins and they're boys. That's the whole nutshell in of it itself. They're hysterical. Everything I wanted in twins, but newborn stage was gnarly. Let's just put it that way. And then that was happening right as we were like building the agency. So a lot of trying to make sure they're fed when you run and take a sales call, all of those fun things. But I think the craziest story, this really goes back to, I get that question all the time. Like, how do you deal with it? How have you done like what you've done? And I'm like, it's really just rolling with the punches. If I could give one tip of doing anything, it's being able to be flexible is invaluable. If I was not flexible, if I had an idea of what everything must be like, and if my what actually ended up being reality did not fit into my version of the way that I expect reality to be, and if I got bent out of shape because there was any misalignments there, I would go crazy. I wouldn't be able to do what I need to do. If I had to give anyone what, I mean, that goes into managing advertising. I think that sort of rolling with the punches, figuring out what you can figure out, and then figuring out the game plan has served me well. But like going back to the most crazy story, I was doing a live. So those are the worst. because everything's live, right? If
Yeah.
you're doing a podcast, it can be edited. If it's a call, it's, oh my gosh, there's an emergency. Sorry, I gotta hang up. When you're on
Yeah.
live and you're sitting there, you're like, ah. So I have an office. I do lock the door when I'm trying to record.
Yeah. That's awesome.
However, my door is a sliding glass window, which is why the lighting's not so great in here. I'm working on fixing that. But I'm sitting here doing a live with the door locked, and my daughter comes to the door with blood dripping down her face during a
Wow.
live call. I had a panic attack. If you watch the live, you can see my face go like this. And I'm like, hold on one second. I went, thankfully, it was a very small, its head wounds bleed terribly. It looks like she was dying. She was completely fine. She didn't even need stitches. But someone had thrown a truck at someone's head, and I ended the live early. There's
Yeah.
nothing you can do at that point. Again, rolling with the punches. My daughter takes priority there, so it
Yeah.
is what it is. But
It is what
definitely
it is.
keeps life interesting.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that. It's hilarious because it wasn't nothing big, obviously, but yeah. Thank you very much. I haven't had any similar things, luckily, but most of the time it's just shuffling. A minute before the call, you're trying to put the little one to sleep, and you just then in a second you are completely dressed and just ready, like nothing happened. And in another room you still see crying, so it just makes you prepare for so many things. And as you said it right, you need to be constantly evolving and changing, adapting to what's happening. It's somewhat similar to what's happening in business. So especially like something comes like from Amazon directly, taking down a listing, and you need to help, and you need to adapt complete strategy because the bestseller is down. It just you need to be easily adapt to shuffling and priorities and everything. So definitely, you have actually an advantage over there because you're so practiced.
Maybe.
I very often admire you with my wife because you and your husband, because we've been through some tough times also. We have two boys, but at one point we were living in a countryside. We were having a garden because we had absolutely love having a garden, gardening in general. But we did that until we actually realized that's too much because it was a countryside with all its ups and downs. For example, I had calls, but then my literally my rooster was on my window. Just we
That
decided
is
to
amazing.
scale
That
that
is,
down. Yeah,
oh
and
gosh.
I remember one time I forgot about the I think it was a sales call. So I was in the middle of my garden. My hands were literally brown, completely brown. And I was like minute before the call, I got a pop-up notification and I ran through the home to be on the call. I was there in time, but I couldn't lift my hands at all during the call because they were completely in dirt. So I was just keeping my hands
Oh,
down behind the table and just talking.
that is funny. Actually, speaking of the small, we've been there a lot. Not a lot in terms of, I wouldn't necessarily say hardships. There's definitely been things you had to deal with, but a lot in terms of like where we are, just dealing with very similar scenarios, the way you're talking about. We actually lived in an RV with all 8 of us for 2 years.
Wow.
That was interesting. Now, my office was not in the RV. Actually, if you look at my old videos, if you see that nice wood background, we were on my in-laws' property, and they had a really nice outbuilding that they let me like take over from my office. It was huge though. I had like a random desk over in the corner. It was super echoey. It was like the background looked wonderful. Everyone always commented on it, and I agree. It was beautiful. But yeah, similar thing. That wasn't so bad because they had a lot of property and it was beautiful and the kids can run and there was a pool and all kinds of stuff. But it definitely sucked when it rained because everybody had to be inside. So there's those aspects of it. But yeah, a lot of, like I said, just rolling with the punches. I mean, we didn't intend to live in an RV for 2 years. We were looking for a property, which thankfully we're on now, and it's everything we hoped it was. But it was, this is temporary. 2 years later, you finally figure out something. So life throws curveballs at you.
Yeah, yeah, we've all seen that. It's funny that we have a pretty similar story. Like we had a lot of issues in our previous house with running water and whatnot, so we had to move, and we were not living in RV, but we were moving like during the search for a house, or living in a house that wasn't ours, so it was also a challenge. Also, big room with echo, so it was really tough time. And our younger son was like, I don't know, 5 months old, so all those things. So since you have so broad experience, what are some of the advices that you can give to anybody who's in the similar or same situation? What did help you and your husband overcome some of the obstacles, or any, because you're so full of experience, so whatever you can share with us would be much helpful.
I'll share with you the one thing that it feels like I'm continuously trying to relearn. And some of it I think just comes with age. Now that I'm in my mid-30s, there's a lot of things that we work through together. So I think the advice I can give is, and this is hard to do, easier said than done, but if at all possible, figure out what you want out of life, completely divorced from any and all expectations. As you start digging into this, you will realize that there are so many burdens we place on ourselves as far as like how we should live or what life should look like. To be honest, yes, there's like the whole morality aspect to it,
Mhm.
like be a good person. But aside from that, like there's so much opportunity and so many different ways that you can choose to craft your life. And some things take longer. Like we were in an RV 2 years before we found like the place that we wanted to settle down,
Mhm.
which is again so much of what we dreamed it would be. But it took us a while to get there, and it took us a while to find that. And now where we're living and how we're living, there's a couple people who've made like, oh, aren't you guys gonna do this, or don't you guys want to do that? And we're like, no, actually, even though we completely have the resources to do that, if we decided that's what we wanted to devote our
Yeah.
resources to, but that's not actually what we want out of life. So my biggest piece of advice, just long term, and again, sometimes we put these burden on ourselves, like especially when you're younger and you're in like early 20s, late teens, everybody's like, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? That is the dumbest question. I'm sorry. I hope I never ask my children that, like, at 18, what do you want to decide the rest of your life is going to be? Like, what? Like, how? I had no idea when I was 18. I would never ever have thought I'm where I am today. I was raised in a very traditional Christian household where the dynamics of husband and wife were very defined. And to be honest, I like living in that, but yet I've now morphed into a role where I'm the one who's primarily just doing the day-to-day in the business. And yes, my husband helps out, but the roles are like very different, even though the
Mhm.
dynamic might be very similar. I didn't know I wanted this at 18. I didn't know I wanted this at 20. So I would say, one, give yourself grace to figure out, because sometimes you just got to figure it out and you end up stumbling upon something. But then I would say, again, just as much as you can recognize when that sort of internal, when you want to do something, but you almost feel like that internal, oh, I can't. Try and determine if that's because that doesn't align with who you want to be as a person, because it's very different, right? Again, we want to be good people. We don't want to be jerks. You shouldn't be running around being a meanie. But if that reservation you feel in yourself is because you feel like, oh, I can't because such and such, or someone will think this or whatever, I think that's a lifelong battle of trying to like
Definitely.
shed yourself of those expectations. But when you do, you end up being able to craft a life that you want, that makes you excited. And ultimately, I think there's a lot of freedom that comes with that for sure.
Thank you very much. And I agree that if one really needs to be true to themselves. So if you have an honest conversation with yourself, then a lot of things start to open up. That's what I witnessed in my life, because I was in love with our house that we had in the countryside, and I wasn't aware of that. That to the point that I had to have really deep conversation with myself. It wasn't easy. It wasn't good at all. Where I actually realized that, is it me, and am I fulfilling my dream, or am I making something good for my family and for my business? And then after that long conversation, we actually ended up having a good conversation, really fruitful with family and with close relatives and friends who were involved in our life at that point. So yeah, I completely agree, and thank you for sharing that. The one thing that we've seen is that, at least for me personally, when I'm in peace, knowing that everything is fine on my private life, like kids are okay and I devoted enough time with them, not just time, but just quality time, just being there. How they call it, like a present parent. But there are so funny memes with that, like present parent and the other one who's shuffling everything. But yeah, I've seen that if that's all right, then I can dedicate myself to handling a brand that has a big catalog, and I'm sure that you can add a lot to that. Which actually leads us to another point, how all of that goes with managing big brands and a lot of catalogs. And just can you give us some examples on that, because I know you have a lot of those too.
Yeah, and I guess one of the things that I've realized over the years, one is you can accomplish more than you think you can sometimes. When you look at something, you're like, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to figure this out? And trust me, I've been there. I'm still there. Oh my gosh. So I'm trying to figure out how to craft this in a way that's going to be helpful. But one, it's figuring out where your true priorities lie. And I love the story you just shared. You're like, hey, I really like this one thing, but I realized that this other thing is more important.
Right.
So we shifted because this is the important thing. And really, when it comes to managing larger catalogs or figuring out those things, it is that. Now, there's always going to be like you have like your best practices, the things that work that sort of like move in the background and help move the brand in general towards the greater goal. But in terms of where the actual work and the effort and the strategy comes in, it's really identifying what are those big growth levers. What is the largest impact thing, again, that moves me towards said goal? Because you might have a large impact item, but doesn't necessarily serve the greater good and the greater goal where you want to get. And so that's one thing that we constantly push our brands to. It's like, hey, what is the goal? If we want to increase sales, be defined by how much, over what length of time. Okay, when we're looking back at this, are we analyzing year over year? Are we analyzing month over month? Are we looking at maybe week over week? Like, what is our, like, how are we measuring success? And then what are those important things to focus on? Because we're guilty of this in our personal lives as well as with our brands. We're like, I want everything. Trust me, I do too. I want to be able to do this, and I want to be able to do this, and I want to be in peak physical condition. I want to make sure that I'm eating really well, and I want to make sure that my business is thriving, my family is thriving, and all of these things. And I think on some capacity that is possible, but it's not always going to be possible to do everything today. And so you really have to figure out, okay, so what is that top of the list item that's going to, if I don't move this lever today, tomorrow that's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Tomorrow that's going to have a bigger roadblock to my greater goal. Because what happens all the time, because it's easy, right? Our brains are programmed to be freaking lazy. We want the easiest thing. We want to make ourselves feel like we're making progress when in fact we're ignoring that dumpster fire over in the corner and we're just like sitting over here playing with this little thing. So
Yeah.
we want to say, oh, I did this thing today. I checked the box. I feel like I'm doing good because I know how to do this. It makes me feel good when I do this. I feel like I'm being accomplished, but either because we're ignoring that thing because it's hard, which could be you're ignoring figuring out your inventory management. And you know that those inventory fees are coming, but you don't want to have to, because that's hard, right?
Yeah.
You know that your profits have been suffering. You don't want to go through and have that conversation with your manufacturer because you feel like you really haven't gone through negotiations before. That's going to be super hard. You really don't want to have to figure out, you know, that your ads are a mess and the campaigns are a mess, but like it's just something I'm going to put off for tomorrow. But that's like the biggest growth lever, the thing that needs to be fixed ASAP. So I'm speaking to the choir here. My default mode is sprint. Always has been, I think always will be. And I'm all like, I want to go, I want to do the, and I, for the longest time, I'm saying this to myself now because it is something I'm currently working to get better at still, is to sit down and do the planning. Oftentimes we feel like the planning is like it's a waste of time. Like I should just be doing, I should just be doing all the time. And if I could just do all the time and just like, knock it down, I'm gonna get it done. But the thing that we're missing is that like that pre-step that and it oftentimes this planning does not have to take as long as we think. We always think it's gonna take a million years. It doesn't have to,
And
but
it's
it's like
boring.
it's boring, it's tedious, and you have to look at your faults. You have to look at why you're falling short.
Yeah, to
You have
pace
to look at
yourself
all of the
actually. Yeah.
things, right? You're looking at that, you're like, oh, if I would have only gone through and optimized those ads 6 months ago, I'm an idiot. And why did I not do this sooner? This feels like you have to confront all of that in yourself, and it's hard. But what we've seen is that if you can stop, do a little bit of planning, figure out priorities, execute on priorities, that's how you can take care of this huge. And what's going to happen, and you're going to panic because you have this huge, like complex catalogs. We're managing ad accounts for SKUs like upwards in the tens of thousands, right? It's insane.
Mhm.
Ton to take care of, right?
A ton.
You feel like there's this whole ball of stuff. And you're like, if I only focus on here, I'm gonna miss all of this stuff, and this stuff is
Everything's
gonna
gonna
break.
fall down. Yeah.
Everything is gonna fall apart, and like I can't. But what ends up happening when you don't sit down, and you don't do the planning, is you jump over here to this thing, and then you don't quite fix it, and then you jump over here to that thing, and you're like, oh my gosh,
And
I
it's
totally
chaos.
forgot about
Yeah.
that thing. And you're all over the place, and what happens is because you haven't sat down, sat back, done the strategic planning of it all, you're missing sort of these wide gaps. And so that's what we look at with brands. When we take on a brand, we're like, okay, what are we trying to do? How do we need to get there? What are our biggest gaps? And then we just execute on
Right. And I completely agree with you because it feels like we as advertisers, one could easily guess, okay, we're gonna help you with ads and that's it. But lately I've seen that we as an agency owners and ad specialists, you or however you want to call it, we actually need to help brand owners have that conversation, like with themselves. Like, okay, these are the pain points that we are seeing. This is these are the inventory issues. These are the listing issues. And yes, it's gonna cost you a lot of money because your catalog is so huge. You have these 10,000 SKUs and these 500 need an immediate upgrade. Yeah, it hurts. But that's the thing
it.
that you need to do in order to move forward in a way that you want to go. So, yeah, I feel like that's something that our roles have shifted from just being like advertising PPC to being a holistic method and helping just brand owners think more and speak to them. If you're not a sales guy, if you're a sales guy, then it's completely
Yeah.
different. It's good. Yeah, we can
Yeah.
do everything. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. I think it's the one piece and the thing that I think, and again, we're in the PPC management specifically area. So that is the lever in which we help brands pull to be able to grow.
Right.
But that being said, building ad strategy has to start with brand goals. And whenever I've seen like a very large disconnect between a brand and what their ad manager is currently doing, be it in-house, maybe they're doing it themselves, or
Right.
maybe they have another agency or something, it's looking at the ads in isolation. And sometimes like it's not really any fault in the ad manager. Like I consulted with a brand and it's wild to me how, because sometimes it's almost like feels like you have to pull the thread on the brands to get them to figure out, like, okay, so what do we want? They're like, I don't know what I want. Okay, do you want this or this? Like, it's which of these is most aligned? You just almost like you work through it with them. But there was one brand I was consulting on, and he kept saying, oh, we want sales growth. I want sales growth. I want sales growth. And I'm like, okay, cool. So what sales growth? Okay. The best question to ask, and you have to ask it at the right time, but the best question to ask is why. And so it was like, okay, I want to try and 4x this Q4. Okay, why? Oh, because I've not made a profit in 2 years and I have to continuously put into this business. And I feel like growing sales is going to help me correct that.
Yeah.
And I stopped and I was like, hold up. Wait a minute. Because I know that pushing for that 4x growth, while probably achievable, isn't very difficult and next to impossible to be profitable.
Right.
Like, you're probably just going to lose more money by trying to do that. And so my question was, does your ad managers know this? And he's like, I don't think I'm like, there's your problem. So there's these disconnects, and it's not because, again, it's not that the ad managers are trying to, it's just they don't have the context. So when a brand comes to me, like if the only context I had was the brand saying, I absolutely need to 4x sales this Q4, heck yeah, okay, let's build that ad strategy. I'm not technically trying to do a disservice to the brand to be able to build out what he's requesting of me. I mean, it's what the brand's requesting. What I find is when you don't have the context, when you don't ask that why question, it's a communication breakdown. So they feel like I do this all the time with my team, with my husband, with my kids. I feel like everybody has the context that I have in my brain, and that's not true. So I'll tell them one little piece of information. They're like, okay, this. And I'm like, wait, that because all of this other context, when in reality, so when you kind of sit down and you can have a very open discussion and a conversation around the whys and the whats and what it is that you need, like the needs, that is where the most creative and the most fun ad strategies get built. Because then we can take all that context and go back to the ad. So instead of saying, I need a 4x growth, that's a very specific, what I find is when brands tell us, I need to rank on this keyword. I need to 2x sales on this product. I need to do this. Oftentimes, the ad strategies I can build to make that happen is very narrow. I get stuck in this box. And what happens is because I don't have the context, I'm building a strategy that has negative repercussions on what it is you're actually trying to do. But when we can have the conversation around, this is what I'm actually trying to do. This is why I need it. This is what I need from you. I'm like, oh, well, then you don't need this. You need this and this. And in fact, I have this really cool out of the box strategy that actually does this. And then I get opened up as an ad manager. My job becomes really fun. I can think out of the box. I can get creative and actually give you what you really are wanting instead of just, hey, here's one KPI we got to optimize for. Sure. And then nobody's happy.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think the takeaway from what you just said is that they're really, that's one of the big benefits when you actually, for brands to actually speak with agencies who've been there for so long and have a history of working with with brands, because their in-house ad manager or a freelancer can never have such a wide experience in order to help them drive that conclusions and ask the right questions, as you just said, because that's crucial in determining what's the driver. Is it, as you said,
Yeah.
no profit for 2 years? That's scary, but maybe just deciding that they need to. Very often brand owners are in love with their product and just cannot let go, and I understand that because of all the hours and weeks and nights that they spend building
Mhm.
and growing it. But eventually somebody has to help you just make the right decision. As you said, there are best practices, but there are priorities, so
Mhm.
it's both in family and in
Yeah.
business. Thank you very much. And we don't want to get this too long. So something, what, just wrap us some takeaways both for the private part and for work from your experience.
Yeah. Again, I would just say rolling with the punches and not being afraid to look at the reality or voice the reality of the situation. I think so many
Right.
times we feel as if we speak it out loud, that makes it true. It's not necessarily like truth is truth and reality is the reality, regardless if you want to look at it or not. And I would say the sooner you're ready to look at the reality, and it may not be as bad as you think, maybe there's a way out of it, right? But as soon as you're ready to look at it, have somebody else, different perspectives are critical. I can't tell you. That's why I love the dynamic I have with my husband. Like, it took me a while to be able to, like, grin and bear I as much as I hate to admit it, he's always right, and oftentimes he sees the reality for what it is
With
way
this
longer
on the record.
way before I wanna accept it, and then later on, I'm like, "Oh, you know what? That perspective was super helpful," and yeah. So if you can, I would just say, if you're struggling to figure out something on your advertising, if you haven't been able to get something to work, it never hurts to reach out and get a conversation and have someone give you that different perspective and probably open up a different point of view that you've never thought of before. And then that often can lead to the breakthroughs for you to be able to fix it and get on the path that you need to. And again, the one that works for you. Because not every brand is looking to have, I don't need like a 5x every year and like this $1 billion exit, right? I need
Right.
to be able to have an additional revenue stream where I can provide better for my family. Or maybe you want that 2 years sellout. There's so many paths to what a successful business looks like. And I think the sooner you can figure out what that actually looks like for you, then the path or the avenues to build that become way clearer.
Thank you very much. I just wish that as many brand owners can hear this episode, because I think it's going to be mind blowing and moving at the same time. So because just to actually ask themselves the right questions. Elizabeth, thank you. And just give us, what's the best way to contact you if somebody wants that?
Yeah, so if you want to have that conversation, I'm more than happy to do so. So the best way to reach out is going to be our website, which is junglr.com, junglr.com. Of course, feel free to reach out to me on any social media. I'm really active on LinkedIn, so that's probably a good place.
Awesome. Thank you very much for being our guest today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.